Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 435 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is with a type 1 named Josh. Josh is married, has 2 children, one of them has type 1 diabetes, and he's concerned that another diagnosis may be on its way. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. This episode is also sponsored by the Contour Next 1 blood glucose meter. Arden's been carrying the Contour Next 1 for a couple of years now, and it is the most accurate, easiest to carry, and easiest to use blood glucose meter that she has ever had. Find out more at contournext.com/juicebox. I think this episode is exceptionally emotional. Josh is going to be incredibly honest about a number of things going on in his life, and that's going to lead to a very real conversation. As a matter of fact, he's reached out since we've recorded just last week and sent me an update, which I'll put at the end so it doesn't mess up the timeline of the story. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. With this tiny little bit of time that I have left before the music runs out, I'd like to remind you to find the podcast on Instagram. It's at Juicebox Podcast, on Facebook at Bold with Insulin, and the private Facebook group, which now has nearly 9,000 members who are talking about all kinds of stuff with type 1 diabetes. That one's Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. Check it out.
My name is Josh Tobby, and I am a type 1 diabetic. I live here in Texas. I have my daughter with
your Dexcom?
with a signal loss on my Dexcom. We actually just changed the Dexcom for my daughter, who is also a type 1 diabetic.
Okay. How old is she?
She is 6 years old.
Okay. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
6 years old.
Was she just diagnosed this year?
She was diagnosed 1 week shy of her 6-year birthday. She was diagnosed when she was 5.
Okay.
Middle of November.
I feel like for the purposes of good story, we should just say she was 6.
Okay. Yeah. So she, it's just strange that she had a lot of the same symptoms when she was diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
that at least the stories that I heard about myself were both, 6 years old, and but she took it, a lot better than I did when I was 6 back in 1991.
Is that your recollection of how you took it, or is that from the stories people tell you about how you took it?
I think it's more my recollection. I don't know if I know. I don't think my mom has really told me many stories about how I took it, rather than just how things were.
Okay.
And just maybe a little bit of memory of those first year or two of adjusting to everything.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you're 32, 6. It was a while ago. What are we talking about? The 90s?
91.
91. Okay. So what was your recollection of it, since you have some? I'm always fascinated when people remember anything from their early life. So,
I remember going to the hospital and getting the blood sugar. I don't remember staying, and I wish I had asked my mom if we did stay overnight, but I don't remember any of that. I just remember a really high blood sugar. It was actually on Mother's Day weekend. My mom did tell me that I had a baseball game that morning. And previous to that baseball game, she had talked to our pediatrician and with the symptoms, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's diabetes, so take him in." But she didn't want to interrupt my baseball game, so we went after the baseball game and after lunch after the baseball game. my mom's a nurse, by the way, so she, of course, recognized a lot of the symptoms
I see.
that were happening. But at the same time, just like, they say, you only get a paragraph and a half about type 1 diabetes when you're in nursing school. So she had a lot to learn. I think it's interesting. My main symptom was was just peeing everywhere, just constantly peeing and drinking so much milk before bed, that morning at the baseball game, apparently I had to go so bad. I was in the outfield. And so I just walked back into the trees, peed, came back out.
You know what I was just going to say, and this is, I'll let out a little bit of truth here right now. I was on a baseball field last night watching my son play, and peeing in the trees at a baseball field is about as American as apple pie, pickup trucks, and anything else that you can possibly think of. It just is how it's done. So, and when you're 6 years old, you get put in the outfield maybe because you're not the fastest or something like that. And maybe, I don't want to insult anybody that's in the outfield at age 6, but that's why I was out there. Okay.
And I just felt like also at age 6, not a lot of balls went out to the outfield. So I had a lot of time on my hands.
Right. Out there thinking about life and bugs and the flowers. I saw a boy one time get entranced by a moth in a night game. You know, like sometimes they let the little kids play at night under the lights once or twice to give them the feeling of it. And he just wandered after it. Like he was so just absolutely enchanted by it. And he couldn't, and everybody just let him be. Like you said, that age, nobody's hitting the ball out there anyway.
Right.
So,
right.
But it's not uncommon, I don't think. Did you keep up with baseball as you got older?
No, I went from, it was soccer before baseball, then it was baseball, then it was basketball. And, but I would probably count baseball as one of my more watched sports. I'm not much of a sports person, but yeah, baseball there's something calming about it.
Well, I'll tell you, it made me think, and I know there's no real way to do this because it's always going to be so long ago for people, but I find myself thinking there is an episode in talking to someone's parent only about the time from when they realized the kid had diabetes until they took them to the hospital and what they thought and tried to accomplish, like how much life they tried to get into that space in between those two moments. Like I imagine your mom just thinking like, let him finish the game, and then I'll take him to lunch. We'll do something normal, and then I'll break his heart and drag him to the hospital, right?
Yeah, the embarrassing story about that is that my mom wanted to go to the hospital right after the game, but my dad was very insistent on going out to a steakhouse and getting a big lunch, which, she of course was worried about me and my blood sugar after a big lunch. So
was he just worried about being hungry at the hospispittal maybe?
I don't know. I didn't ask my dad. The only thing he can remember is me peeing on the Legos in our game room. So that was the main thing.
Kidding.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how you feel like you have to aim at something?
Right.
Like on the floor would be ridiculous, but the Legos on the floor seems reasonable.
Of course, I don't remember any of that. That's the sleepwalking out of it, and then just
getting up,
that constant peeing. So
no kidding, it's crazy. So okay, so you're diagnosed. How do you, from your recollection to your experience with your daughter, do you see any similarities or differences?
Oh man. The similarities would be, at least in her personal experience, the only similarity I would think would be, the nurses still wear scrubs and they take your blood sugar with a ridiculously sized meter.
Other than that, it's all new, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't know what was in my mom's head. I can imagine she's a very emotional person, and she'll be listening to this, but she knows she is. Right. And so I can imagine there, because there was so much unknown for me. And there still was, 10 years after I was diagnosed. But So what happened? My daughter started. They would have the normal, but not very much. Maybe pee in the bed when they were younger.
Mhm.
But at 5, she had a couple of years of not doing that. But every time she would, my mind would start racing. So then she started getting up one night and was wandering around, and I took her to the restroom. Okay, that's one night. And then it happened again the next night. And my heart was starting to break. And I said, okay, after the second night, if this happens a third night, I'm going to test her blood sugar in the morning. And sure enough, she did the same thing the next night and tested the blood sugar in the morning. And she was 456.
Wow.
And, of course, not everybody has those sorts of abilities to do that. I had 20 meters probably in my house. I could have given her insulin right there, but not really what you're supposed to do. And because of that, we didn't really know what to do. We were like, okay, I don't feel like she needs to go to the ER. She was complaining a little bit of stomach issues, like she didn't want to eat, stomach issues, but there wasn't really much anything else. And so we called around to the primary, and of course the primary is doing a CYA and saying go to the ER. Everybody's saying go to the ER.
Right.
So finally, after probably a few more blood sugar tests, just to make sure, basically dose her in alcohol swabs and make sure that it is high. We did that. So
Wow.
the experience. Oh, I was saying about the unknown. For my mom, it was all this unknown, and for me, it was a flood of known.
You knew exactly what was coming. Yeah.
And so did my wife. My mom's a nurse. I married a nurse. I always have to keep a nurse nearby, and so she knew what was going on because she'd been married to me too, but she didn't. No one kind of knew what was in my head because I was reliving my childhood.
Yeah.
But like you asked, what was different. It turns out everything was different.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely
your daughter's
everything.
childhood is going to be completely different in many ways, but specifically about diabetes than yours was. And did that become comforting at some point, or how long did it take for that comfort to creep in?
It became comforting at some point. Let's see. It probably took maybe 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks after everybody under the sun telling me about how I did a good job catching it early. How isn't it good that you already know what to do? All this stuff. I'm really thick, so it takes a long time to get through to me.
Well, no, I would say, Josh, in fairness to you, it's not that simple, right? Like it is. It's academically that simple. Those things are all true, and they are definitely things you can lean on. But it's emotional, first of all, and secondly, it's not fair. It's not what you hoped for. It's not what you planned for. It's all of those things, and it's hard. You're a young guy, right? I mean, if she's 6 and you're 32, what are you 20, 26 when this
30,
is excuse me,
34.
34. Excuse me.
So
you're 28 years old. You couldn't have been married that long, right?
No, actually, let's see. We got married when I was 19.
No,
19. I think so.
Okay. It was legal. You didn't steal her or something like that, right? No,
we've been married for 13 years.
Okay.
The math, I don't know.
Don't worry about it.
We've been married for 13 years.
So you're married. You're building a family. You're dealing with your own health stuff because you have diabetes. You get a house. You think I'm going to make a baby. This is going to be a thing. Here's what's going to happen. You plan it out in your life. At no point when you're planning out in your life do you think, she's going to get type 1, even though you had it. I still don't think you planned for it. You know what I mean?
Right. And in some ways we sort of kind of, did. I've heard people talk to you about and you talk to, I listen to the podcast all the time.
Thank you.
And, what's the baseball
Sam.
guy, Sam, about talking about, okay, you're still going to have kids, yada, yada, yada. And I mean, the answer was always yes. But we went to a when we got pregnant with I have 3 kids, so I have a 9-year-old. We're talking about my middle one, which is 6, and my 2-year-old. We went to a genetics consult to talk about this and something else, but they said, because I have nobody else in my family, I don't know anybody that's a type 1. I mean, up until, like this, listening to this podcast, I still don't really know anybody, but now it's more of a community. And that was me growing up too, just, to throw that in there. And so I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay. You're upset at the moment, which is understandable, and I don't want to push you too far. I'm a
sensitive boy.
Well,
so.
I have to tell you, Josh, I am too. This could turn into 2 guys crying on a podcast. Yeah. I'm trying to keep that from happening.
Oh, but I was saying about looking for the diet. Like, we were going to have a baby. We were going to do that. I wasn't, there was no. But to me, they gave me enough assurances that it is not likely.
Right.
Because I feel like, I don't know this for certain, but I feel like at that time they weren't quite sure of the links that they are pretty sure of now. The genetic modifier that gives you an autoimmune disease, though it's a spin of the wheel, which one, right? So if they had known that, they would have known, I have hypothyroidism, my mom does, and all these other things that, everybody gets to spin the wheel.
Yeah.
And I also have something called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Have you heard of that?
No, but let's take a detour and find out what that is, please.
Alpha-1. Okay, so I'm going to do my best here because I don't really know it either.
I feel like I'm about to Google, so go ahead.
Go for it. Yeah, Google. Google, and probably the best thing is to image search it because it needs the images. My understanding is trypsin is one of those body juices that helps almost kind of keep your organs oiled and working and protected. And so trypsin is made in the liver, and I believe, and then it's supposed to also help the lungs. So it's supposed to go up to the lungs and help with that. And so with alpha-1 antitrypsin, when you're young, they are checking your liver and your lungs to make sure that it's helpful.
Okay.
And that, or that you have, that you don't have any deficiencies or anything like that. I always thought it was a really good excuse for my mom to say, you can't smoke and you can't drink. But,
So she knew, does she have this too?
No, she does not have this. Okay, so this is...
But it's an inherited condition, so somebody has it, right?
It is a inherited condition. Both of my parents are carriers, so that's the positive R, capital R, negative R. What is it?
Oh, dude,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
recessive.
Recessive.
Dominant and recessive. Okay, so then they made my brother. He is... I don't know what he is. He might be a carrier. Then so here's the sad part. I should have a sister that is 2 years older than me.
Okay.
But she died from alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, or she died from needing a kidney or liver transplant.
Okay.
Oh, my mom's going to hate me for not knowing that. I think it's a liver transplant.
I don't think your mom's going to hate you, but
I know that.
Yeah.
But they couldn't find one, and so she died when she was one. She died when she was about 1.
Oh my goodness!
And so then, for some reason, my parents decided to have me, and and of course, when I'm born, this is going to get trippy. When I was born, they tested me and my brother, for the deficiency. And when they drew the blood, they accidentally drew from my brother's vial both times.
Okay.
So I was negative.
He was negative, so they thought you were negative. Now, is there any care that you missed out on for not knowing?
Not any preventative care, I don't believe so.
Yeah, okay.
But I started getting a little bit sick when I was a baby. And so my mom, who actually, remember, she's a nurse, so she wrote some sort of journal article about it about alpha 1 way back in the day and stuff.
Kidding.
And so she recognized it, and they went back and they retested, and I am positive, and so then they eventually figured out that must have been what happened.
Mm-hmm.
My mom then, and I, there's a higher power or something out there that made that happen, because my mom said that if she knew that I was positive, the attachment, she
would have felt like
she's already been through a death of a child, and so yeah, I don't think I got a little bit sick, but nothing that, obviously happened to my sister. But what we have come to find out now, 30 years later, is trypsin. They're linking the amount of that a lot of type 1 diabetics have a lower amount of trypsin in their body, I guess.
Okay.
Remember, I'm not really a sciencey guy.
Don't worry, so, I'm hanging with you. Go ahead.
So that trypsin is not just lungs and liver. It's helping oil all of the organs and protect all of the organs, and making maybe those white blood cells work better, which actually I guess would be a bad thing, but just making things work better. And so we find this out probably 4 or 5 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago.
Okay. Right
around the time that I saw you in Dallas at the JDRF, and that just blows my mind. So my alpha 1 antitrypsin that I've had for all my life interacted with whatever virus caused that gene to finally, pop and start my autoimmune attack on my pancreas.
Right.
That causes then my diabetes, and then the diabetes, of course, causes a whole bunch of other stuff.
Wow. Well, I'm going to soak that in for a second. Did you have hypothyroidism prior to diabetes or after?
After.
I
mean, I might have. They didn't give me any meds on it for it until like when I was 22 or something like that.
Is that when you started noticing, like, what was it? Like, what got you for the hypo? Was it energy, sleep?
No, actually, I didn't know anything.
Oh, okay.
It was my I was a tired, 20-year-old, master's student at that point.
You expected to be tired, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it was just I've been presented with these things with that cholesterol stuff. No, I guess not that one, but the cholesterol and heart medicine as a preventative, as a, hey, your body's being taxed by diabetes, you should take this to help those out.
Right. I've heard that a lot, actually, that people take cholesterol medications, like things that you would normally take if you were approaching or having a problem. Sometimes they take it as preventative, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I've been told. I know sometimes my cholesterol can be a little bit off, but I have chickens and I eat a lot of eggs. So, and I'm not going to stop that.
Well, what are the chickens going to do with the eggs if you don't eat them? They would turn into more chickens. Now, what would you do?
No, right? Well, no.
Oh, no, they wouldn't. We don't have a rooster.
We don't have a rooster. Yeah. So
wow.
they would try to make them into little chickens, but they would fail. And yeah,
I tried to get you to say something so we could call the episode Cock-a-Doodle-Doo, but I guess we're not going to get there. So that's fine, Josh. Don't worry.
Oh, no, you can say it.
No,
yeah.
No, let's not force the issue. So I have to be honest with you, and since I guess it's not, the alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency does not seem like a fun thing to have. Are you feeling effects of it, or how is it?
I don't think so.
No,
I really don't think so. I have offered myself to a lot of different studies done by pharmaceuticals or whoever for that, but because I have never been symptomatic, they don't ever take me.
I see.
One that they were actually looking for someone with no symptoms. They wouldn't take me because I have diabetes. So I'm thinking like in 3 or 4 years that they're going to have something where they're actually looking for diabetics, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what, I mean, besides, death of my sister, I don't really know what happens with trypsin alpha-1.
It's fascinating. I mean, I'm on the NIH website here. People with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency usually develop the first signs and symptoms of, did you step on that dog? Of lung disease between ages of 20 and 50. By the way, let's just digress for a second. I bet you cannot find another podcast while during the reading of a serious disease, someone jokes about stepping on a dog. The earliest symptoms are shortness of breath following mild activity, reduced ability to exercise, wheezing. Other signs and symptoms can include unintentional weight loss, recurring respiratory infections, fatigue, rapid heartbeat upon standing. Affected individuals often develop emphysema, which is a lung disease caused by damage to the small air sacs in the lungs, the alveoli. Characteristic features of emphysema. Well, all right, about hacking, we know emphysema. About 10% of infants with alpha type 1 develop liver disease, which often causes jaundice. Apparently, approximately 15% of adults with alpha-1 develop liver damage, cirrhosis, due to the formation of scar tissue in the liver, signs of cirrhosis, blah, blah, blah. In rare cases, people with alpha-1 develop a skin condition, which is characterized by hardening skin and painful lumps or patches. Well, holy crap. I'm glad you don't have it. I'm glad you don't have symptoms of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like wondering, like, okay, so when my firstborn was jaundiced a little bit, he didn't have to stay any, but he was jaundiced. My mom probably was like, that's triggering in
your
her
poor
head
mother.
Sort of yeah,
and I looked at trypsin too because you specifically talked about it. It's a serum. This doesn't make any sense. I could read these words and 4 people are going to understand them. But you're saying, who told you that people with type 1 can have less trypsin?
It's some sort of study. I could probably, my wife is the smart one of us. And so she found it and read it, and I can send it to you after this.
I will put it in the show notes if you said it. And I know she's the smart one because you stepped on the dog sitting down. So that's no big deal. All right. So I'd like to add that to it. And, just so people can follow along if they want to. Okay. So, holy Hannah. So how old were you when you realized you had this? Because
alpha-1?
Yeah.
I was probably 1 or 2, or maybe 3 when my mom took me in, or whenever I got sick, somewhere around there.
Okay. So it was at birth, they checked no, obviously yes. And then a little while later. Okay. Okay. Why don't we go back to something more upbeat, like type 1 diabetes for a second?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Back to that genetics appointment, they tested my wife. Yeah, they tested, actually, this was after my son was born, but they tested my wife and they found out that she is recessive. Mm-hmm. So none of my children are going to have alpha-1, but they're all going to be carriers.
Okay. Well, listen, at this point in history, Josh, we're all carriers, apparently.
Right.
So,
yeah. Oh, so, you're talking about, current event history, COVID attacks your lungs. You don't see them, talking about all those people with alpha-1 antitrypsin that the COVID is going to be even worse for them on top of the type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
That's because nobody has alpha-1 antitrypsin. It's very rare, is my understanding. So all my kids will be carriers, and there's research. I don't know if it's the same research that my wife read, that even as a carrier, sometimes you will have lower levels than, not out of the abnormal or out of the normal, but just lower.
Right. Okay.
So, hey, maybe that's what happened, and I think during those first 2 to 4 weeks of my daughter's diagnosis, I kept on going back of why, of course it's, I still battle the idea that it's my fault because I'm pretty sure. I mean, come on.
Gvoke HypoPen has no visible needle and is the first pre-mixed auto-injector of glucagon for very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes, ages 2 and above. Not only is Gvoke HypoPen simple to administer, but it's simple to learn more about. All you have to do is go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with insulinoma or pheochromocytoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Why don't we ever wonder what blood glucose meter we have? We just take the one the doctor gives us, the one the insurance company says is okay. But we never think, is it the most accurate? Does affordability and accuracy, do they have to be competing? Can I get an affordable, accurate meter? Why have I never thought to look into these things? Well, luckily for you, I have looked into them. And that's why I'm here today telling you about the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. And it is at least worth your time to look into. contournext.com/juicebox. They have test strip programs. It's possible that you could be eligible for a free meter. It's possible that your insurance company will cover it. It's possible that the meter will be less expensive if you pay out of pocket with cash than it would be for another meter through your insurance company. These are a lot of possibilities, and all of them can be looked into further at contournext.com/juicebox. The Contour Next One meter is easy to use, easy to hold. It has a bright light for nighttime viewing. And darn it, it has second chance test strips, which means you can go in, touch the blood, not get enough, and go back again without decreasing the accuracy of your blood glucose test. Check them out. There are links to all the sponsors at juiceboxpodcast.com or right there in the show notes of the podcast player that you're listening in. And if you're not listening in a podcast player, please do. And if you are and you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time. Let's get you back to Josh.
I still battle the idea that it's my fault because I'm pretty sure. I mean, come on.
You think the diabetes came through your bloodline, but that's not fault. All right, Josh, let's take a detour for a second, because I watched my wife do this for years, and everyone knows who's married. You can't listen. You're not allowed to tell your wife things. I don't know why. It's just the rule of the universe. So here's how I'll put it. I got a message last night from a mother of a child with type 1 who's doing a terrific job with her kid, and she's come a really long way in a short time, but her messages are panicky. And so I said to her, can we talk like friends for a second? And she said, sure. And I said, good. You got to calm down. I was like, just relax. I said, you're doing terrific. I know you want to be doing better. But you're doing terrific. You have to calm down. And she said, oh, my husband keeps saying that. And I was like, why are you not listening to him when he tells you need to calm down? She goes, I don't like it when he tells me that. And I was like, yeah, I'm not allowed to tell my wife to calm down either. I said, but I love that I was able to tell it to you. It's very freeing because I need to be told to calm down sometimes. I'm not saying it in like a gender way, like, lady with the vapors. I'm just saying that sometimes people get an idea caught in their head and they just can't let go of it. And I wish I could have found a way in that moment with my wife while she was blaming herself because there are autoimmune issues on her side of the family. I just kept saying, it's not your fault. It's no one's fault. It's random. It's, how could you be at fault here? And she would never listen to me. And I wish I could have just told her, like I was a person outside of her. Because I think if someone could have just told her instead of me, she would have accepted it better. So this is my chance, Josh, to make the world a better place. You got to calm down, man. It ain't your fault. Okay. You didn't do it.
It's one of those things where you can point at all the science, and it's something. It doesn't affect me day to day, but it's something that I
It's
feel.
inside. Yeah. I know.
And that, talking about like, okay, alpha 1 maybe causing or helping to cause type 1 diabetes, and then type 1 diabetes and all those side effects that come from that. And that's one of those is major depression. I was diagnosed with major depression this summer, June, I think it was, before she was diagnosed. So last June. So
When did we meet?
We met after she was diagnosed in this year, January, February, whenever the dialysis one was.
I don't want to be blamed for this depression is what I'm saying. Like, is meeting me, can it throw people into a tailspin? Okay, we'll pick this apart a little bit. So your daughter hadn't been diagnosed yet. You've been living with diabetes for a long time. So my first question is, do you find it difficult to live with type 1?
I find it difficult to live with the effects of type 1.
Okay, which ones?
Picking that apart, because when I was growing up, I was not a good diabetic, and I just, when at that time, it was NPH and R. You had to give the R 30 minutes before. You had to wait. And then, okay, this is my plate. I get to have bell pepper, because there's always bell pepper because there's no carbs in that and just need something. And I can have 45 carbs for lunch, and I can have 60 carbs. And so everything is regimented. And remember, my mom's a nurse. I'm going to keep saying that probably. Right. My mom's a nurse, so she follows the rules, and so I say that, and I'll step back and say my mom is great, because like for Halloween, she would go to like 10 of the nearby houses that knew me and give them packs of baseball cards to give me instead of candy. Uh-huh. So yes, my mom.
Did you know that was a setup even as a kid? Were you like, nobody else is leaving here with baseball cards, or?
I think I figured it out after the first house. Whenever like they have a bowl of candy. Oh, Josh, let me. There you go.
Mrs. Johnson's like, Josh is here. Everyone, to your places.
Yeah.
Get the baseball cards. Act natural.
Don't breathe on him.
Don't let him see the Reese's peanut butter cup.
Oh man, you went Reese's peanut butter cups. That's the best one. So and just school. There was a certain kid that would say, "Why don't you go diabetes?"
Oh,
it's just like that. I mean, not very creative, but it certainly hits you, because every single day you're leaving to go to the nurse, and you've heard all these stories.
You don't know whether to be upset because of the absolute meanness of the statement or the lack of creativity. Really, which way do you go? And when you're young, this all is, I'm assuming every ounce of it hits you with the full force, right? It's just terrible. I can't imagine otherwise. Wow. You got to give me a second on the go die diabetes thing. You fried my mind there. Jesus.
I don't think that would be a good episode title.
I don't think we're going to call it that.
It would turn people away, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Like, you can't get away from it. It'd be the first thing I would say to any new teacher. Like after, probably after second grade, my mom would do everything up until second grade, but I would tell them, hey, just so you know, I'm a type 1 diabetic, look for these signs, blah, 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 blah. Or maybe give them a note that my mom had written.
Right.
So it
colored everything, right?
It colored everything. It changed everything. Not to say that I didn't use it to my advantages sometimes. There was community pools that we would go to, and I would go up to the lifeguard and say, my blood sugar's low. My blood sugar's low. So they would give me 50 cents so I can get a Coke. So that was nice.
Hey,
taking
finally a win in all of this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Of course, then I have to drink a Coke, but I'm more of a Diet Coke.
I see. You didn't really want the Coke, but you did like the idea of getting the freebie. I got to be honest, Josh. I see the attraction in that. I really do.
Taking naps in the nurse's office, stuff like that.
Right.
Going in for feeling low, but it just colored my whole life.
Yeah.
It made me think that into the teenage and going off to college years that I probably won't get married because I'm going to pass this disease on, and or I'm going to die young, all this stuff. Because I don't know if it was for everybody. It doesn't sound like it's everybody's experience, but there was a certain amount of fear-based boundaries, treatment. I don't know what to call it. Always reminding you of your feet, of everything. So that's the. As soon as my daughter was diagnosed, that all flooded. I'm like, this is going to be horrible, and this is my child that loves candy, and all this stuff. Right. It just came on me, and it took me too long to figure out. Oh, wait, she's going to start where I'm at now.
Yeah.
We had a Dexcom for her. Honestly, no, actually, we were able to get a Libra really quickly because they're just in the pharmacy. Mm-hmm. So I switched to the Libra for a little bit and gave her my Dexcom. She had a Dexcom in a week.
Yeah.
And then of course now has her own.
Well,
and it hasn't affected her. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I feel like we're going to move forward here in a second, and I just want to remind you and everybody that's listening that what you just said is just 1,000,000% true. You had a very common experience having type 1 diabetes, a couple of decades ago. It just is what it was. And I don't want to be reductive. There are people who don't have great insurance or don't have great doctors for whom diabetes might be very similar still, just with some better insulin, right? Mm-hmm. There are still a lot of people who just are like, here, give an insulin and a meter, and they're like, here you go, this is it. And that's unfortunate and sad, but for everyone who's not in that situation, this is night and day. Like this is, space travel compared to walking at this point.
Absolutely.
And your daughter will have a completely different experience. And I think that hopefully there'll be a way for you to feel the joy in that, and move forward. So how did you handle the depression, diagnosis? Are you doing something about it? Did it help, or where are you at with that?
I am a counselor, a therapist by trade, and so it took me. Of course, it took me a little bit longer than it should have to go see my own therapist, mm-hmm. And so I started seeing somebody, and then eventually got on some medication, and it's taken from from August or September to a couple months ago to find the right mix that has been relatively helpful.
It's interesting because it occurs to me that you are the exact kind of soul I would want as a therapist, and you are the exact wrong kind of a person to have to go home at the end of the day having been a therapist all day. How do you do? Because you seem very empathetic, and mm-hmm. you're making me happy. I mean, you're like not by being that came out wrong. Like, I feel comfortable talking mm-hmm. to you, and you're only one of a handful of men who have ever been on this show who have been able to reach inside themselves and talk, from a place of how they feel, which I appreciate. But mm-hmm. after a day of people dumping their stuff in your lap, how do you walk away from that? Or can you not?
It's a trait, or it's something you have to either learn. You either have it or you have to learn it, mm-hmm. or you're going to be in burnout land, and you probably won't last as a therapist. So at some point, I've learned it, I guess.
So it's academic when people are talking. You listen for words, ideas, things. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
I'm 100%. I mean, My wife calls me a super empath, which I think is something like, again, she's the smart one, she's the reader, and maybe it's just empath, where it really affects me way too much.
Right.
And so like, I grew up with, my parents got a divorce, and like I said, there was just so many feelings and so many everything that somehow I got all the feelings and my brother got all the thinkings, the brain stuff. He's able to deal with the feelings by just not feeling, and
he
and I
thinks his
can't.
way through stuff.
Yeah.
There have been times on this show where people have come on and surprised me with the things that they've said, and I've handled it by trying to be more academic about it. And then there have been times where it catches you by surprise and you feel like your heart opens up and just wants to hug them, and you feel like your chest is going to explode. It's very interesting. It just struck me as you were talking. It's like, oh, this poor guy, like he must leave work some days just being like, oh my gosh. But to your point, how you'd have to learn how to deal with it, or you probably couldn't do it very long. Well, the people who seek you out, I imagine, are lucky to have you. So that's lovely for you to give yourself like that.
Yeah.
Good for you. All right. Okay. So diabetes sucked when you were younger. Kind of thought that's how your daughter was going to be moving forward. It's not. You know that now. Fighting with feeling like this is your fault. You get diagnosed with, is it clinical depression? Is that the diagnosis? Yeah. So that gets medicated, right? Did that help?
Eventually, the first meds that I took turned me into, I was just completely numb. Yeah. I couldn't feel anything. There was no happiness or sadness, which if that's how you want to be, then you can be like that. But I couldn't enjoy things. So I didn't much like that. The next one, turned me into a zombie. I couldn't focus on anything.
Right.
Like, yeah. Maybe the next one didn't really work, and then eventually found one that worked.
Wow. That's persistent. Good for you. Yeah. How, for people to hear that, they should understand too. What's the time like? So the day you decide this is it, you try one medication. How long does that go before you try the second?
That's the hard one. Because between every med change, it's about a month.
Right.
Because with antidepressants, it takes at least a good 2 weeks for it to build up in your system to be effective. You're not going to pop a pill and be like, oh, the
finally.
Sun's shining.
Yeah, right.
You have it's a buildup,
and then you find out it doesn't work, or it works differently.
Yeah, and so then you don't always have to titrate down. Some of them you do have to titrate down, but sometimes you can just kind of switch over or just add something. Try to boost it. Okay, what about this much Prozac, and then if it's not working, it's not working.
Right.
And then, then you do like a quick titration, and then, adding this thing and see what happens there. But so it was multiple month after month after month,
right,
to find eventually Effexor works. So
Effexor. I've heard people say that one before too.
It's a dual activator. So it's a little bit more hardcore than some of the other ones. Gotcha. At least that's how I describe it to people.
So you've got you have highs and lows again, but you don't feel overwhelming sadness. Is that it? Well, that's a triumph. Congratulations. Seriously. That's a big deal. Do you think it's something that was brought on by a trauma, and maybe, or do you think it'll be with you for a long time, the need for the medication? And how do you figure that out, right? Because if you go off it,
right,
that's the only way to figure it out.
I hope I don't need it for forever. I'm not against the idea. I mean, I can't be because I take insulin, right. And I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I know it wasn't like an immediate trauma. It was built from my parents divorced and type 1 diabetes, 100%, and just built up from that. And, if I probably could have been diagnosed when I was in middle school, when I was telling my parents I hate life, like a moody teenager.
Right.
So
Well, let's do this then. Let's dip into your skills and put ourselves in a time machine. What should young Josh have done different to not end up here? Do you have thoughts about that?
that's hard. I mean, one thing that you do with therapy is, or you can do, is remind people what they have control of and don't have control of, right? I did not have control of my parents divorcing, and I did not have control of getting type 1 diabetes or the effects of type 1 diabetes. If my personality was more like my daughter's, I might have been able to own diabetes a little bit better.
Okay.
If I had sought out, a therapy like I had been doing pre-COVID, to try to recognize where this stuff is coming from and that it's not in my control. And sometimes we just have to deal with that it's not in your control earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been it. But it's one of those things, I don't know if I would ever, because there's a certain amount of just genetic, blood makeup. Maybe I have a little bit less dopamine or whatever it is in there that I'm just more susceptible to it.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything that young Josh or even, college Josh could have really done. I don't know.
Just so maybe just having someone to talk to, I mean, is it fair to call it like letting the steam off? Like sometimes like to keep you from getting to critical mass? Is that what the conversation does for people sometimes?
Yeah. Okay. And we oftentimes we call that being a sounding board, if, and sometimes, that is all people need, just to be heard. Maybe they don't have someone at home to be heard, or they have a topic that they can't bring up with their mom or brother or sister or, loved one. And they just need to be heard. But then, it's always that question of, okay, you can come in week to week and be heard, but what are we going to do about it? Can we do anything about it?
Right.
And if so, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. And for you, obviously, if diabetes was one of your stressors, I mean, the only thing you can really do about it didn't exist back then for you. Right. And like just finding management ideas that didn't take up as much of your time, didn't cause you to bounce around as much and feel that way and to be scared all the time. So you listen to the podcast. Is your management like completely different than it was when you were younger? Have you had luck with that? Okay.
Oh yeah. So when my daughter, the one that was diagnosed, was about 1 or 2, I had a seizure in the middle of the night. Up until that point, I had never been hospitalized for being too high. I'd never been hospitalized for being too low. I've never had any of those sorts of issues. And that hit me. I honestly don't know what happened. And it was very, very scary. And I was preparing myself for this. I was talking to my wife this past week. And I realized that what hurt the most, I mean, it hurts to have a seizure, especially if you bite your tongue and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what hurt the most, I just remember laying in the hospital bed in the ER and just feeling a tremendous amount of shame that I didn't take care of my diabetes well enough. That, it's this, I know we don't curse here, but it's just that moment where you realize, okay, the Reaper's coming. And that's what hit me. I don't think I developed a sleeping issue after that, but I had trouble going to sleep for a long time after
scared
that.
to go to sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lo and behold, out of that muck of crap comes the idea, oh, what's this? What's a Dexcom G4? And this is where I'm going to really rail on my endocrinologist. I'm not putting my endocrinologist on your docs list.
Won't be on the juiceboxdocs.com page of great doctors.
There's your promo. Yeah, everybody go do that. I will mention some names of good people, but my endocrinologist is not. But she's an adult endocrinologist. I have asked her. She said that no more than 5% of her caseload is type 1 diabetics.
Mm-hmm.
So how is she supposed to know?
Right.
She never introduced the idea of a continuous glucose monitor to me until I had this, and it was some other doctor or my wife. Remember, she's the smart one.
Yeah.
And oh crap, so I got that, and I immediately went probably from, I don't know where I was at. I'm pretty sure it was like an 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
Down to under 7, and then kept on going. And since that date, I haven't been like over 6.3.
Wow.
And I was still doing MDI, but just with the Dexcom.
Right. That's amazing.
Being aggressive. And so the seizure changed my life in good and bad ways. I couldn't sleep. I was more anxious. I was more depressed, but I was also getting better.
Yeah.
Getting better care. And that happened again with my daughter, that it tore my heart out. It broke my heart. And I realized that I hated diabetes. I knew I hated diabetes, but I couldn't hate diabetes anymore. I can't go around, not that I did, throwing my, shots and saying shots are stupid or something like that, but I can't have that about diabetes anymore, because I have to take care of her.
Yeah.
And I have to let her be free, which meant I had to be free of that feeling. And that took
self-loathing? Like,
oh yeah.
Take her out of it. It feels like the diabetes and you were the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I am a diabetic. There's been a trend lately, the past probably like 10 years, of trying to push people to not be the diagnosis. So you're not a narcissist. You are a person that suffers from narcissism, sort of thing. I chose that one specifically for you.
I felt like that was aimed at me, but thank you.
I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I have the power of diagnosing. I don't believe you meet the diagnosis criteria of narcissism.
Oh my God! Finally, that's it. I'm using that. That's going on the website. Not a narcissist. Please leave your credentials at the end of the episode.
But yeah, it's you're not a schizophrenic. You're suffering from schizophrenia.
I understand. Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. And so, but I'm 100%. And not only was I a diabetic, I have been a bad diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C has been horrible. Go ahead.
You said that at the beginning, and I thought, boy, that's an older idea in diabetes. Like I never hear parents of younger kids who are more newly diagnosed say we're bad diabetics. It's always adults who are of a certain age who at some point grew up with the idea that doing it right, whatever that meant, with a needle and insulin and nothing else and no direction, and doing it wrong meant I'm a good diabetic or a bad diabetic. And I hear some people say it with like real loathing, like they screwed up. I hear some people say it with a lilt that tells me they know it's ridiculous and it's just something people say. But it really is prevalent in people with diabetes of a certain age to feel like they either did it good or did it bad. And that's such a shame,
Yeah, that hit me again this past week. I've been listening longer to the podcast longer this past week, but I've been going nonstop this past week because I had slowed down. But you had said to somebody that it's just that age, that between 30 and 40, just that age bracket, something in there in the care for diabetes
Just wasn't
was what I mean. But at the same time, you know, for the generation that boiled their pee, I don't know if you're hearing that. You know, when you had Dr. Ponder on,
Right.
he didn't say that. You
Yeah.
know, maybe he's a great diabetic. We all know he is. But
no, just if you're, it's that there's a middle ground. Like you're saying, if you're older than that, like whatever that range ends up being. I've never done a study. I don't exactly know where it is. But if you go into that generation prior, right, who had nothing, then, you know, regular and MPH in like 30 minutes before probably seemed like a dream to them. And so their perspective's just different. Yours is, you know, listen, I mean, obviously you can't make people feel any way. If you could, everybody'd be happy because somebody with better perspective than you could just point out, you know, what's up, and you'd be like, oh, great, that's perfect. I'll just start feeling like that now. Obviously it doesn't work like that. But if I step back from your story here for a second, what I hear is, for all the, you know, miles of crap that you slog through, what you end up on the other side with is the exact right education to make sure that nothing like that ever happens to your daughter. And I feel like that's what parenting sort of is anyway, except, you know, except we don't see it as much. You know, here's another way to think of it. A person grows up with terrible parents, and it either overwhelms them, right? Or they learn from it. That usually ends up being what it is. And even the people who learn from it are still kind of, you know, messed up in their own special way. But they have a perspective that tells them, I don't want to do those things. That's how society continues to gradually get better, you know, and it happens so slowly. You can't even see it in your lifetime sometimes. It's happening. It feels like autopilot. And if it wasn't diabetes, it would be something else. Like if you didn't have diabetes and your daughter didn't have diabetes, there'd still be something from your past that you've learned from. It just wouldn't be so front and center in your mind. And she'd come through the room and say something, and you'd say, oh, no. And kind of, you know, course correct her based on this knowledge you have from the past that would be burned into you, but not, you know, not on the tip of your tongue constantly. Just with diabetes, it's always on the tip of your tongue because you keep living it. It's Groundhog Day, right? Like it just won't stop happening. So it's more out in the front. I don't think it's any different though. So somewhere in there is your ability or inability to not wallow in it. And I don't mean wallow as pity, but that's the only word that popped into my head.
Well, wallow is a really good word, because I was going to say, you know, in that age bracket, we're talking about, you know, 90s kids, and we all listen to Nirvana. So it's Nirvana's fault, you know, that we're wallowing. But when my daughter was diagnosed, from that point in the next, you know, 2 to 4 weeks, I learned so much more about diabetes than I ever knew in the previous decades. 25 years. Yeah. It's insane. Right. We went to, so this is where the good endos come in, to our children's hospital, and not that I knew the name yet at that point, but lo and behold, it's Dr. Ponder's team. And so our endocrinologist, Dr. Stevens, is amazing. And one of the nurses there, his name is Brant, is amazing, just absolutely amazing, to the point of like, I gave her a couple of shots in the hospital, you know, for her and stuff like that. No, I guess it was maybe the day after, but it was hurting her a little bit. Not that she didn't, you know, I mean, there's shots and she's 6.
Yeah, right.
So when we went to him, you know, his attitude is just so positive. He was able to teach us, but also mainly teach her that, look, I can do a painless shot. And he did it, and she didn't feel a thing. And hey, it can be painless. He taught us never to call this a good blood sugar or a bad blood sugar. It doesn't have a moral standing in life. It's just that high blood sugar or low blood sugar. And all those things weren't there, I don't feel like, you know, when I was going to Texas Children's, and because my hemoglobin A1C was a certain height, I had to stay and talk to the dietitian and yada yada yada. So it's been amazingly different in getting and being able to let her have the freedom, like with that Dexcom. My wife and I, based on what you talked about with Arden and not restricting food, we don't restrict any food. Now, we're not letting her just have Skittles every single meal,
right?
Because we weren't doing that anyway. But there's no food restrictions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big deal. I just looked at Arden's A1C for the last 90 days because I wanted to echo what you said. When I let go of the idea, not good or bad blood sugars, I don't think I ever felt about them that way. I think I felt about them like, okay, we need insulin. She doesn't need insulin, like that kind of feeling. It's high, it's low, it needs carbs. Like I always thought of it as reactive like that. Mm-hmm. But still, when I let go of the idea that Arden's blood sugar was going to be 85 all the time was a big deal for me. And it didn't lead to her A1C being any higher or any better or worse. It was just my crap in my head, right? Like the jumble that would pop up into my head when I saw it, like the difference between being like, oh, she's 160, she's starting to head up, we probably didn't pre-bolus in time, or this wasn't enough insulin, or whatever it ends up being. We'll just do the thing that makes sense to do now and move on. I'm not saying, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that, I see Arden's blood sugar at 300 and just go, oh, whatever. Like I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the, like, not beating yourself up over it part. Like that part, that was very freeing for me. And I did it for a number of years before you guys knew me, but it was not beneficial and it wasn't helping anything. Like I think it feels like it's helpful. Like I'll punish myself over this maybe so that it doesn't happen again, but that's not how it works. So, you can't tie a blood sugar to personal punishment. It just doesn't, they're not connected to each other. It doesn't make any sense, And
that's something that I had to learn.
Yeah, of course.
And I still don't know if I've learned 100%, like not tying my, like if I'm having a roller coaster day and it's because I'm, doing something wrong, I'm usually bringing that on myself. But luckily, I feel like we haven't had any of that sort of stuff with my daughter. At the very beginning, my wife looked to me to be some sort of expert on diabetes. I'm like, what? I don't know anything.
Have you not been paying attention?
I could barely take care of myself.
Remember
I don't know how to take care of someone else.
Yeah.
Like, so we've learned together how to take care of her.
Good.
And I mean, and honestly, now I think it's probably more her. I know that at one point I remember you saying that it seems like it's better when there's one person in charge of the care of a child, but really it's probably like 55%, 45% me, and she was 7.6 when she was diagnosed with diabetes, which I don't think is that bad.
No.
In the grand scheme of diagnosis. And then she is her last one, which would have been, November to July, was 5.
Wow, that's
she's
amazing.
5.0.
Jeez.
So I caught it really early.
Right.
And
did a good job.
I've been amazingly thankful. They kept us overnight one night. Technically, they said she went into DKA, but she was never that bad. When we got out and went over to the endo's office, they said, oh man, you should have just called us and come in. We could have gotten that blood sugar under control and wouldn't have to do any of that hospital stuff.
Right.
I was like, well, we didn't know that. We didn't know who you were, So I'm pretty thankful for my ability to catch that. That was something that I when I'm crafting something for the house or whatever, I see all the flaws that I did, but I have been able to get that that joy out of being able to catch that.
Good for you. No, I mean, it's a big deal. And you helped her and her launch into this is so much better because of it. Plus all the things that dangerously could have happened if it would have just gone unseen too long. I genuinely believe Arden was just a couple of maybe a day or two away from going into a coma. We didn't we just kept staring at her like idiots, just, wow, she looks really sick,
Yeah. And see, I don't think I would have, she was 2, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to, I mean, I wouldn't have known what symptoms looked like for then, where, same age,
right.
And same symptoms, at least similar symptoms. So
I just don't hold on to things like that the way other people do. And it really, this conversation has made me think that, not that I don't think I didn't realize this before, I just never kind of put it into words in my own mind, but the amalgam of who you are, how you grow up, what your brain chemistry is, the things that have happened to you or not happened to you, they all are going to inform your reaction to something later. And me feeling like I did my best and I don't hold any weird feelings about not figuring it out sooner is probably a lot less about me, like the conscious person you're talking to, and a lot more about however I got built over the years. And just the same as I think your reaction is probably as much to do about that as it is about anything else too. The things that happened to you and how they intersected with, your physiology and everything else. It's just, I think that anybody would look at somebody who's having anxiety or depression or worse and think, I'm better than they are. You don't realize you don't realize it's just, you're just lucky. It's just dumb luck that didn't happen to you. You're not broken and I'm not, you know what I mean? There's something that could happen to me tomorrow that would run me over that you'd probably skip right through. We just haven't found that thing yet. I don't know. I think it's important not to feel that way about other people. And I know it's crazy to say it like this, but like I saw Kanye West say something yesterday, and your first thought is there's something wrong with that guy. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't feel like I would never say like, he's nuts, ignore him. I would say, I think there's something he needs that he doesn't have, and to me that seems, it's horrible, like that somebody can't help him or that I don't know what it is, but I would never look at him and just judge him as somehow inferior to other people. He's been through stuff that I haven't been through. And, and so on and so forth. I just think like I when I'm talking to you today, I just feel like you never know, man. Like if there could have been 4 other different turns in your life and you might feel differently. And who's to say that those turns aren't going to get made better moving forward and you're not going to get to feel differently in the future. Because we've been talking for over an hour. You've been upset for 50 minutes of it at the very least. like once it hits you, like it hasn't gone away, and that's a tough way to have to live day to day, especially because, and gosh, Josh, I'm so sorry, but we said we were going to say this, but your youngest has markers for type 1 as well, right?
No, my oldest.
Your oldest does. So the 9-year-old looks like it's about to happen for them as well.
So like a couple weeks after my middle was diagnosed, we were around the dinner table, just having fun with, a blood sugar meter, as you do. And he wanted to test his blood sugar to see how it felt. And so he tested blood sugar, and I looked at it, and I turned it and showed my wife, with my bug eyes, and he was 264.
Oh, yeah.
We had just had dinner. He was 264, and she just looks at me, and that I have not experienced the feeling of hope just devoiding itself from myself. That didn't make sense. Hope just leaving me.
It
as much as I did
to me, Josh. That happened to me
that day.
Yeah, I've had that.
And it leaves me speechless at the moment. And so we we dipped him in alcohol and made sure it was all
There's
clean.
no sugar
because,
stuck to him anywhere, right?
Yeah, we because he was actually squeezing strawberries for some weird reason.
So you're like, maybe that's it.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And so we tested him again, and he was still high.
What did you tell him? I don't know.
I don't know if we really said anything at that point. We may have said, well, your blood sugar's a little high. But then we left the room and started bawling.
Yeah, right.
So, it's one of those things where, like, I knew a little bit of what to do with my middle. But at this point, I was beyond action. I could not. I was a puddle.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Luckily my wife, I think at this point we were at a messaging basis. We called the endo's office, and they said, okay, we'll bring him in tomorrow morning. We'll do a hemoglobin A1C and check his blood sugar then. So we did. There wasn't much sleep that night. I wanted to check his blood sugar another 6 times while he was asleep, but I didn't. And I remember the moment we were in the waiting room, and the nurse Brant came out, and he looked at me, and because I'm like this with everybody, so he knows I'm like just at this moment of just about to cry, and he looks at me like he feels my pain, and what he says was, "Why the heck did you check his blood sugar?" That's going to lead to trouble. But it's like we were playing around. No, so we checked his blood sugar there and did his hemoglobin A1C, and I think his blood sugar was like 100, and I think his A1C was like 5.2 something. It wasn't bad. So we were like, okay. We took per the doctor, we took one of the extra Libres that we had, and put it on him. No, they gave us one of the professional ones, so that it just got all the data, so that we didn't have to fret for 2 weeks. Gave it to them. They went over the results. We saw the results. Okay, this. I was looking at this. Doesn't look that bad. But Dr. Stevens was like, oh, man, there's just something about these numbers that I'm not 100% comfortable with. So he ordered the antibody test. We got the antibody test back, and he was positive for 3 or 4 of the 5 antibodies.
So it's a matter of time, possibly, before it happens.
I'm pretty sure that, because they've all said that it's not impossible, it's a win, because his antibodies are attacking his insulin, like the insulin that's in there. And one of the other ones that, like, just in a combination, it's going to happen. I remember that phone conversation. We were outside, and I'm just listening because my wife is the one doing the talking, and it's just I could not understand what was going on, and why my wife stayed with me and married me in the first place. Well,
I think that there are a lot of people who think they know how that feels, and I know I feel like I understand what you're talking about, and numb's the wrong word. It feels like that there's nothing positive that exists in the universe, and it's all gone, and it feels like it disappears in a split second. It's very powerful. But I think the good news is that, that's not really the truth. It's not what this ends up being is not what you were hoping for, but you hear people on here, right, all the time who are living terrific lives, and they're not going to be any different than your kids, and they don't need to be any different than you, honestly. So, I often wonder about, I sometimes think I'm going to have a grief counselor on the show one day to talk about the connection between being diagnosed with something that's incurable and how people respond to death. Because I think they appear to just match up to me. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, man, listen, it appears to me that you were fighting with something for a very long time that you've just started to address for yourself. And then you have this diagnosis and then another diagnosis or, upcoming diagnosis. It feels like I can't tell if that's worse if he would just have it today or if you get to think about it. I'm not sure what's worse for your psyche.
That goes back to that argument of should you have like your kids tested, or and do those antibody tests.
Do you want to know the day you die? If I could tell you the day you were going to die, would you want to know? Right. And the answer's got to be, I think no.
I think, well, with the dying one, definitely.
Yeah, no. Unless it's like next week, and then I would some really stupid things I'd like to do for a couple of days because I've been pretty good to this world, so I'd like to I'd like to lose.
Well, you got to get all those
for
podcast files set up for posting.
Gosh, I'd have to get all the editing. I'd spend the last week of my life editing shows, and getting them ready to go up for you guys.
But you would have a lot of people there, for your funeral listening. All the listeners would come in and everything.
The show would finally be as big as I want it to be because people are like, did you hear about the guy that died? But first he set up 6 months of his podcast to go online. Great.
This is a grim joke that we're going on with.
We just went right down into my head where I was like, oh, then I wouldn't know. That's what would
be.
But
most of the time things are. It's not like, so Dolly Parton, she has years and years of music that she has recorded. And
I thought you were going to say huge boobs. I did not know where that was going. I was like, what is Josh about to say about Dolly Parton?
She has all this music saved up.
Okay.
I can't even go with that. But and so yes, and so she's going to probably get even more popular in moratorium, whatever it is.
Wow, you used the wrong word, but now you used it so badly I can't think of the word that's right. All right, we'll think of it later. That'll probably end up being the name of the podcast.
Oh God, no. Dolly Parton's big boobs.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say something else, but never mind. As long as we got you to say it. Listen, man, I have to say that I can envision an absolutely delightful future for you that I think is already beginning to happen, but I don't know if I can talk you into believing it exists or not.
I've never been a good, like just sitting in a classroom listening learner. Mm-hmm. I need to try it out. I need to do it with my hands.
Yeah.
I'm trying to build a bass guitar. And so I'm practicing on another piece of wood to try and make sure I figure out how I can do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I have to experience and learn, and I think that process has started. I thank you and the podcast for helping me with that, because a lot of it, like I had said before, is the community. There was a time I went for a work conferencey learning thing to Dallas, and the hotel clerk, I recognized a Dexcom or something. And I was like, oh, you're a type 1 diabetic? At that point, I want to say that was probably the first type 1 diabetic I had talked to in maybe 5 years.
Knowingly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. To me, we were always, silent, and there was nobody. But then, the podcast, you're bringing people on. I'm hearing their stories, which I absolutely love, because I'm a counselor. I'm getting on, I don't do Facebook, but I look at, your group and then the Loop group. So I Loop and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that community has really made me realize that, okay, there's more. And though my son's personality is probably not going to be as good as my daughter's personality about it, he'll be all right.
Well, he's got every opportunity, I think, and that's kind of all you can hope for at this point, is that, that the options are all positive, and that the ideas will be vetted by you, and then by somebody smarter, your wife, and then
and more beautiful.
Well, I didn't want to say, but it's all right there. Now, if he's not going to be, well, he shouldn't be burdened with the experiences that you were, right? Like, he doesn't have a sibling who passed. That's tough. Like, whether you think of that or not, that had to have been very hard on you growing up. It had to be hard on your mom in ways that probably rebounded around the house you wouldn't even be able to see as a child. And then, everything else that comes with having type 1 diabetes at that time, having someone say to you, why don't you go die diabetes? Because, let's hope that kid stubs his toe as an adult. That kind of stuff isn't going to happen in your house. And so you just have to traverse the other 5,000 things about having diabetes that everybody else has to get through. But with the best technology that's ever existed in the world, I'm sure
I have this list of all this stuff of like, and you've talked about endocrinologists and how that's been, and I can talk about, our school experience, and how that's been, but you're right that, at least my personal journey, I have to not, equate their experience with my experience.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. And with my son specifically, he has not watched my daughter suffer at all. In fact, my daughter probably gets, 3 times as much candy as she used to. We're not a Juicebox family. We're a Skittles family.
You're a Skittles. Have a couple Skittles.
So let's see. Yeah. Let's see. I don't know what the generic name for Skittles would be, but that's what we are.
Yeah. You have generic Skittles?
No, I'm just thinking like if you wanted to name the podcast that, rather than getting in a trademark or copyright thing,
Yeah. Maybe I'll just call this one "Taste the Rainbow." Who knows?
Taste the Rainbow. So yeah, we love Skittles in this house.
I was leaning towards Josh has all the feels, but we'll see what happens.
That's very apt. So and it's. I have never not had insurance. That's one of those things. Like it has put a lot of responsibility on me in good ways.
Yeah.
And currently, I have excellent insurance that will cover us, will help us. You're right. The future is in front of us, and. Yeah.
Josh, all you got to do is calm down. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, the dog that I did not step on.
Well, please.
We actually got through the help of donors in a GoFundMe. She's a diabetic alert dog.
Oh, wow.
We're just trying to cover all of our bases. So I started with the Omnipod after listening to you guys and also that nurse Brant, because I thought, okay, maybe my daughter would like to have the Omnipod. We would like her to have the Omnipod, so I'm going to start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as I decided, okay, I'm going to start doing the Omnipod, my wife, the smart one, she looked up and saw this thing called Loop. I'm like, okay, so. Yeah, I jumped. I mean, I think I did the Omnipod, normal experience for like 2 weeks. And then I started looping.
Okay.
And then here comes your podcast again to be able to kind of help me with that. Not in an advice way, of course, but help me with that. And then Jenny, I signed up for integrated diabetes service and went and I did not ever get to meet Jenny because COVID happened and moving happened and my subscription ran out. But I got help setting up the loop and getting that going and it just keeps moving forward. And I remember recently that you had someone on just talking about how all the medical things with diabetes that are happening, like it doesn't feel like there's any other field that is moving so fast.
I agree. I think that it's building on itself too. It just feels like it's gaining a momentum that I just never thought would happen. Like I say all the time and I really do mean this. There was a long period of time while Arden had type 1 as a younger person. Obviously, for people who have had it longer than her, we're just, a company coming out and being like, look, we made a new meter. Is it any better? No, but it's new. Like, that was an advancement. Like, look, we changed it. Look, the numbers are easier to read. Like that kind of stuff was a leap at points. And now we all stand around going, well, when's the Dexcom G7 coming out? Like,
yeah.
And the minute it comes out, you're going to be like, is there going to be a G8? Like, you'll say it immediately, and then you'll say, no, Russia got kicked out of the G8. It's G7 now, which will be a bad joke that I will tell at some point. But it's moving at the fastest it ever has. And I really do. I agree with you that algorithm pumping for those who can get it and want it is going to be a big deal. Your son may never know diabetes, even a sliver of the way you knew it as a kid. So it's really good. It's excellent. You're in a good spot. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah, so. I was put on this earth to raise diabetics.
I wish I knew why I was here. but
you were here to disseminate information and comfort to those that can find the podcast.
Oh, geez. As soon as I said that, Josh, I was like, it's going to seem like I was fishing for a compliment, but I really meant I don't feel like I have a real purpose.
Let me check the DSM with the narcissism there. No.
As soon as I said it, there was a voice in my head that went, don't say that, because it's going to feel like you said that, so we'll say something nice. But I didn't. It just popped out of my head. I just, I don't know how other people feel like during their days, but I genuinely almost always feel like I should be doing more than I am. I don't know what broke in my life coupled with how I'm wired that leads me to that feeling, because I think if I step back and look, I think I'm doing a lot for people who I don't even know, which is already, I think, more than what a lot of people are able to accomplish. And so that should feel good. My kids are healthy and doing well, and I'm keeping a home for them. And all those other things. I feel like if I quantified myself on paper, I'd think, oh, that guy's doing okay, but there are still times when I'm standing somewhere thinking like I could get another episode of that show out, or I really do want to have a doctor on to talk about intermittent fasting. And if there was more time, I could nail this one guy down that I want to have on and get him on, but I just, I can't do everything, obviously. And the podcast can't just be on constantly. And so I don't know. I don't know if that feeling of I'm not doing enough really just means I feel like there's more to do. And then maybe I'm making it about myself instead of making it about what's left to do. I'm not sure, but
Well, if I was your therapist, I would say that a lot of times people base their worth on their productivity.
Okay.
And sometimes if we're not that it seems like you're feeling down or anything like that, but we always are wanting to push our productivity so that we can push feeling better, and so being able to step back for a second and look, at what you've created or what you've done, practicing that mindfulness is always a good thing. It's not going to take away that feeling of, I want to do more, because it's good that you want to do more, but realizing, oh wow, I have done a lot.
Yeah. I'll tell you where you see it, where I see it the most of that idea of like, it's not enough is with, so, you measure a podcast by downloads. It's streams or downloads or whatever you want to call it. It's people's ears hearing episodes, right? And then you measure it by how far into that episode they listen. But those are pretty much the two ways if you're doing okay. And my wife was joking with me the other day, and she said, do you remember when you told me if you can just get the podcast to 15,000 downloads, you'll know it's moving in the right direction? And I said, yes, I do remember saying that. And she's like, she goes, how many downloads did you have this month? And I said, 115,000. Like I, at one point was talking about the entirety of the show, like just making it to 15,000. And now this is the reality. and I look up and I see that it's about to hit 2 million total downloads. And my first thought is,
didn't you just hit 1 million?
Yeah, I got to 2 million pretty quick after 1 million.
Yeah.
So I see the 2 million, and what I should think is what you just thought. Like, wow, I hit 1 million, and I got to 2 million much more quickly than I got to 1 million. This is going in the right direction, and it is, and I know that academically. But when I see the 2 million number approaching, I think, I wonder how much more quickly I could get to 3 million than I got to 2 million from one. Like, it's just that weird feeling of like, how do I do this better, stronger, faster, quicker, like go. And I am a little competitive too.
Yeah, so, I was about to say we are a competitive race. Right. Generally. We're always trying to push and do better than the people that are copying you.
There are times when I'm low-key astonished that I'm able to keep my concern for people living with diabetes in second place, or in first place, in front of my feeling of wanting to win. Mm-hmm. It's because they feel like two things that they feel incongruous completely. Like the idea, like, I want to have a great podcast and I want it to be listened to by as many people as possible. And that kind of thing. And I just really would like people to feel better, like, and just be healthier and meet people. Like you said, you never met anybody with diabetes before. It does that for some people. And so I really do feel that way. I love what the podcast is, all the good parts about it, but they also have, it also has downloads, and I'm like, more. like it's weird to try to keep those two things separate. I do see them as separate, but I don't ever want them to bleed onto each other. Like, I don't ever want the idea of making the podcast popular to be more important than the podcast actually being popular for a good reason, I guess, is what I'm saying.
If like a few minutes ago you had said, I really want to get on Dr. Oz to talk about intermittent fasting. I can't think of a popular doctor, and I hate Dr. Oz. So,
yeah. If I said that, I'd know there was something wrong with me.
Right. But if you had said, I can't get, I really want to get this famous person because they have type 1 diabetes. Rather, you said, I want to get the information about intermittent fasting out to people.
Right. I hear that.
That's that difference.
My whole marketing plan around this podcast is that somebody listens to it and gets enough out of it to tell somebody else about it. That's the entirety of my plan for getting bigger. So I just think that trying to plan for anything else is silly, because it's false, right? Because even if you can drag people in, they're not going to stay. Like, if it was boring or banal or just in any way not listenable, then you'd get them there. You'd go to all this work to drag them in, and then they'd listen and go, I don't want to listen to this. And then they'd be gone. So to me, if it helps people, it self-sustains. That's how I think of it. So anyway.
So Scott, how does that make you feel?
A little hungry, actually, because we've talked into the first hour of my intermittent fasting schedule today. And somebody downstairs is cooking, and all I can smell is food. And then my brain goes, you only have 7 hours left, and this is a good conversation with Josh, so don't stop talking to him. So
there we go.
Yeah, we're going to have to stop Josh so I can eat.
Okay. Hey, happy birthday, Arden.
Oh, I will tell her. Thank you. And listen, on a complete off note, I just have to ask you before you go, and thanks so much for coming on and doing this. You were incredibly honest and open, and I really appreciate that. But what kind of headset is that? Because it sounds terrific.
It's one that the VA gave me. It's from work. It's a Jabra.
I see that. Okay.
So Jabra is a brand that's out there. I can tell you it's Biz 2400, and then there's like a 2, like Roman numeral 2 almost.
Okay.
And it plugs into the USB. It's plug and play.
Yeah.
It has this that I can mute and whatnot, and
no kidding. Jenny, you're about to get a new headset in the mail. Sounds terrific. So, and it was super
good.
clear.
I was thinking, because I have like earbuds or to plug in. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this thing working on my personal computer, because it was a work thing. So
no, it's terrific. It really is good. Yeah. Sometimes I send Jenny technical gifts, and she then calls me and says, "How do I hook this up?" because she's delightful.
Well, this one should be easy. So
no kidding. All right. Well, listen, man, the best to you and your kids and your family and that poor dog, which obviously can't live much longer the way it's being stepped on. And just, I really do appreciate you doing this. And oh, look, that's a beautiful animal. Look at that.
Ooh, time to stretch.
Lovely. What kind of dog is that?
She is a Bernedoodle, actually a quarter Bernese Mountain Dog and 3/4 Poodle.
Yeah, I burned Snickerdoodles once, but I think I had the oven too hot, to be perfectly honest. Bernedoodle I've never heard of before. I'll check that out too. All right, Josh, I'm going to go downstairs and eat something before my stomach attacks my brain.
All right.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Have a good day.
A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. And to learn more about the Contour Next One blood glucose meter, please go to contournext.com/juicebox. There are links in your show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com. And as soon as this music stops, I'll fill you in on what's been happening with Josh. Okay, Josh wrote me just the other day. I'm sorry, I'm not on the microphone. Josh wrote me just the other day and said, since we've spoken in July, a few things have happened. In November, his daughter hit a 1-year anniversary with type 1. And on December 7th, they officially diagnosed his son with type 1 diabetes. He says now there are 3 of us in the house. He did not have to be hospitalized, which was great. And he was quickly put on Tresiba. And then in a few days, they allowed them to start using Novolog to get him off the roller coaster. But that he's adapted very differently than his daughter has. And I've sent Josh an email back and invited him to come back on the show in 6 months or so and tell me about that. I'd just like to say, Josh, that my thoughts, my family's thoughts are with you and your family, and I'm sure everybody listening has you on their mind and in their heart today.